much for your time. I'm very, very interested in your show. I really, really enjoy shows like that where we can see a perspective of things. The show, of course, is called Someone They Knew. And what was intriguing to me is that it's told from the perspective of family and friends. And that's something that we normally don't have. How do you
Right.
think that by telling the stories of these victims of crime changes the perception
Mm.
of from by the public of how they view the crime and the victims, and kind of dispel maybe preconceived notions they have about victims of crime?
Well, I think for many reasons. The first reason is one of the things that I always say: who's the witness to your life? The witness in the room, not necessarily the witness to the crime, but the witness who knows you, who can
Mm,
tell your journey, and perhaps whether it is the victim or the perpetrator, learn more about this individual and why. And I think that that's something you don't get on a police report. That's something in many cases you don't actually even get in the courtroom. And I feel listening and hearing people who are intimately a part of the lives of the people we're discussing is important. I also think, from my perspective, there are so many crime shows, and I did one for 6 seasons, by the way. But my intention is always to remind people this is a mother, a father, a sister, a brother, a friend. And the best way to do that is to talk to the people who were part of their lives.
mhm. It is definitely considerably more humanizing, because when we hear it from the perspective of law enforcement, it's a subject, it's a
Mm.
case. It's never this person who
Yeah.
meant this to these people. Is that, as a reporter, and of course, and research and producer of all these elements, how does that change your approach to
Mm.
presenting the story by seeing it from that perspective after previously doing a show that was guided from another perspective?
One of the things that I've done since taking on this type of reporting, this type of covering crime, is the night before I have the case in front of me, and I truly meditate and I pray that I don't cause any pain to the families who are watching. That's not how I was trained as a reporter in J school. That's not in the classes that I took. I took law and ethics. I took, history of reporting. And at some point, I decided it was important for me to cover these stories this way, not just because of the loss of my sister, but when you're in the room with someone and they are laying bare their pain.
Mm,
I learned very early on that it wasn't, I don't feel it's right to simply look at them as a number. I don't use the term death toll, for example. I was a reporter for
mm,
30 years, and I always marveled at, we'd start the newscast and the death toll after this earthquake. I thought, wow, 30 people die, not the death toll is 30. That's
mm,
at least how I chose to approach it. And the same with this show, hearing from the family members and being in the rooms with people who are locking eyes with you and see you as the vessel where their story will be told is a responsibility I don't take lightly. And it's a reporting responsibility I don't take lightly.
mm. When you speak with the law side participants of the show and have conversations with them in the creation of the
Mm.
episodes, has it changed? Have you noticed a change in them, in their approach to solving crime? If they're still active law
Mm.
enforcement or active attorneys, is it changing their, maybe softening or more,
Mm.
be rehumanizing them
Mm.
after so many
Mm.
years of doing that
Yeah.
type of work and being a little, um, how can I say, disconnected,
Yeah.
would say, from the human
I
element?
think it depends. I think it depends on the case. I mean, for the very reason that viewers watch these shows, I think law enforcement, whether they're attorneys or police officers, approach it the same way. You put yourself at some point in someone else's shoes, right? Even the most seasoned and veteran police officer, at some point, whether the victim looks like their kid, or I went to school like that, or you know what, I one time I went to my car and I made that same mistake. We put ourselves in the shoes, or in some way the life of that victim. That's why these things resonate. That's what we watch. I don't think most people watching it, oh my God, that's interesting. You wonder, could that be me? Could that be someone I love?
Mhm.
And with this show, Someone They Knew, it taps into a really interesting part or type of crime. These aren't people who are jumping out of alleys. This isn't a fender bender between two strangers that goes awry, or any of the other kind of stranger crimes, right? These are people that the victim knew and through no fault of their own end up killed, right? And
Mhm.
so that's such a compelling thing. And I think for any of us, whether you are investigating it or watching it, or in my case, reporting on it, you put yourself in that space of, wait a minute, how does an ally turn to an enemy? How does a friend turn to a murderer? How does a
Mhm.
lover turn into a killer? And I think that's what this show explores.
Mhm. It is. I find it interesting that there's so many of these cases that, people are often fearful of random acts of violence, but it's usually not random. It's someone who sees you, constantly covets and
Yeah.
has their eyes
Yeah.
on you for many different
Or
reasons.
you're
And
in a relationship. 1 in 4 women who are the
exactly.
victims of a violent crime, that's a person, a man typically in their life.
It's
It's
very sad. It's
incredible.
very tragic. We had some word here from a longtime friend of ours that same thing, daughter victim of violent crime, domestic violence, someone she knew,
Mm,
unexpected. People usually don't see it coming or ignore the signs. And I love that the show is shining a light on that it usually is someone and when you see the signs to say something
yeah,
with what's unique about this show too is a lot of times we watch crime shows or shows that investigate crimes and we don't get to see the verdict, we don't get to see it
yeah.
all the way to completion. We just see the resolution of identifying who may or may not be the perpetrator of the crime. How has this aspect been unique to you to
Mm.
see it all the way to completion with the viewer?
Well, I think that's a big part of partnering with Court TV for a show like this. They have archives. They still cover trials daily, in a way that we don't even see in cable news anymore. When I got in cable news, for example, there were a couple of gavel to gavel cases that were covered, but no one does that like Court TV, even from the very beginning. Very famous cases that they covered. And so they have this incredible database and archive system for some of the stories that we've covered. They also have teams that have great access to interrogation videos, which I think are some of the most compelling.
Mhm.
And when you see someone in real time, the investigator dissecting the lie and the person's life falling apart is I can't stop watching it sometimes because again, not that ooh I, it's a study in humanity, right? It's study in humanness or lack thereof. And that's what I find so interesting in some of the video, the gavel to gavel coverage, but also in a few of the episodes where we see the interrogation and how it all falls apart and the level of deception
Mhm.
that people go to in hopes of getting out of it. It's fascinating.
Mhm. You too are fascinating. I marvel at your ability to work on all these projects. You have your daytime show that you also do, and now this show on Court TV, and your ability to retain and present and give it to us. We feel like you're our voice, and you're doing the things that we at home are watching, but it's in such a way that we feel that we know you and we feel like a connection and a
Thank
kinship to you. um, how do you maintain that person, that contact with the audience? Because I feel very warm whenever I watch anything that you're participating in, anything you're presenting. I feel like you really speak for us.
you. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you. That means the world to me that you would say
Mhm,
that.
mhm,
Um, I think it's a couple of things, right? I've been doing this for 30 years. And so, like any person, any woman, I'm gradually becoming more comfortable in my skin. And as a Black woman, becoming more comfortable in my skin. And that means my vulnerability, but it also means my power, right? It's a double-edged sword. And so for me, I I've learned that the best of who I am, is great advice from other women, other journalists, other moms, other people.
mhm,
And the best of who I am is when I can just be myself. And for me, this show, for example, allows me to explore that part of me, which is still a journalist who is fascinated with with the mechanics of court and crime. The talk show, we just had Toni Braxton on today, her
Mm,
first interview since the loss of her sister.
mhm.
Tracy, age 50, a mom, a grandmom, and we're live. And before I know it, we were just, she's on a Zoom, ironically enough. And interestingly enough, she was supposed to be in studio, but obviously 2 weeks after the death of her sister, but she still wanted to come on and we were on a Zoom. And we cried as if we were in the room together because I think your heart and your intentions break through all of that. So for me, I'm I'm just I'm invested. I'm invested in my talk show. And I don't mean financially invest. I'm invested in the people. When we say Tam fam, I mean that. And I was invested in Tony and her sister today. Having watched Tony from the beginning, I could cry now. And the Braxton family values, and to lose your sister and be there when she takes her last breath. So I
Mm.
think what I hope people are seeing is that I'm invested. I stay up and I read these scripts, and I'm executive producer of my talk show, and I wrote the book that touched on missing Black and brown girls not being the headline, because those are the things I'm invested in, and I think and I hope that people like yourself who are watching are receiving that part of me.
Well, it is definitely received. I respect you greatly. I think you are
Thank you.
just marvelous, and I enjoy
Thank
literally everything that you do. So we are very excited to
you.
see someone they knew on Court TV. Fans of Court TV, I have a feeling will absolutely love this after watching years of trials. Being able to see this different component is super fascinating, and I'm glad it's you that's presenting it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for your
Okay.
time.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.